Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Coral Beach Case Files series and founder at Engine Book. Let's see what we have today. Thank you for joining us for another wonderful episode of the Write Project podcast. I know I say that they are all wonderful, but this one really is. We are on the line with Shannon Fay, the wonderful author behind Innate Magic, the first book of the Marrowbone Spells series. It's published by 47 North. It's their debut book, and it's as wonderful. It's an amazing amount. It's got 830 ratings on Amazon. On Goodreads at this moment. It's got LGBTQ representation. It's got magical realism. It's a little bit of historical fantasy, a little bit of every genre, and it is getting rave divisive reviews, which is my gold standard for, oh, this is good. Like, when it's all good reviews, something's gone very wrong. But thank you. They're also a constant submitter to the Kitsora contest, which we absolutely love over here at Engine Books. Thank you for joining us, Shannon.
Thank you, Matthew. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Tell me about Innate Magic. What brought this to you?
Well, like you said, there is a lot going on. So I've always been a big genre reader, big into fantasy, right? But I've also been a big fan of like crime novels, right? So I think there's some hard-boiled aspects in there without it being kind of unnecessarily, like a urban fantasy. It's kind of its own thing. Historical fantasy is what I call it, right?
Yep.
And I've always been a big sucker for British history. For a couple of years, I lived in London, and while there, I worked at the National Portrait Gallery, right? Which it's a gallery, a museum in London, which is just portraits of British figures throughout history, basically roughly starting at the Tudors, going up to modern day.
Okay.
And yeah. So working there, often got to do like research on the portraits. Most of the job was telling people not to use flash photography, but some of it was getting to look in the archives and get to see behind the scenes kind of what's going on. And living in London, it was a great experience, a very expensive experience. I don't know if I'd have the energy to do it now, but every street corner has some historical significance, and it just seemed like such a magical place. But at the same time, it's still a modern city. It's dirty, it's expensive to live in, it often seems like a bit of a scramble to survive. So I wanted to write a book that kind of captured that feeling, where it's like, oh, this is such a great place to be, but it comes at a high cost kind of thing. And so my main character, he's the type of optimistic person who I think thrives in that kind of situation of finding the best in people, even when that gets him into trouble, because he is able to do this type of illegal magic, innate magic of the title, right? And in this world, it's only certain people, one person, the court magician, is allowed to practice this magic. But for reasons that you'll have to read the book, he also has this ability to do it.
Okay.
And when dangerous people find out about this, they want to use that for their own means.
Okay, interesting. So interesting that I just got it on Audible, so that's loads of fun.
Yeah, the narrator, he does a fantastic job because I just love British accents, right?
Yep,
So
excellent.
so almost every character, it's like, oh, let's give him a Midlands accent. Let's give him, and the poor narrator has to then do that. So
Lovely.
yeah.
I am getting strong John Constantine vibes, which is why I download that just then. I was like, yeah, okay, that's for me. Any influence there, or is that like
I
subconscious, or is
mean,
that unintentional?
I do love the character of John Constantine, but like I said, my main character Paul, more of an optimistic, a lover, not a fighter, right? Less abrasive than John Constantine, and whereas the Constantine comics always have like this this layer of filth, right?
Yeah,
which
yes.
which is a selling point, not an insult.
No. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is maybe not as gritty. I mean, there's still some parts. I do
I,
think for a book to have stakes, there needs to be violence, right? So
yeah,
there are
yeah.
still some violence, but maybe not as pervasive, right?
Yeah, yeah, I saw from the comments some people were posting like their, and not
Yeah.
negatively, but posting like content warnings and stuff like that. So
Yeah, which
not
I feel bad about after the fact,
no,
you know.
no.
I was There's things where I was like, "Oh yes, this is an intense," but I also felt like it comes near the end of the book and characters had at least talked about the possibility of such a thing happening that
The,
yeah,
that's interesting. The content warning exists within the narrative almost, kind of.
that's what I would kind of hope, right? But then there's still the element of like when it actually happens, it being like, oh wow, this is upsetting, right? And sometimes that's just how it is, where it's like, oh yeah, this is worse than I thought it would be. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. I've got that download, so it's gonna be lots of fun. Okay, so I'm getting strong vibes from this as well as the John Constantine vibes about like, and it's a theme I see in a lot of books, class kind of thing, because part of the premise you're describing is someone has power that they shouldn't. Like the power ends up on this side, like the people who are supposed to have it, mages, the magicians, all this one that you're talking about. This person is just innately has this power kind of thing. And it's interesting because like we see that a lot in our society. Like there's people with power, not magical power. And then every so often there's someone that comes along and they have a good idea. They have a good, they write a good book. They do their art well, or they have a great idea, an invention, or a business, or whatever. They have an innate power, and there's always an uphill battle, like from the people who are kind of supposed to have it. Is that intentional? Is that just part of it? Like, how much of a commentary are we doing there?
Yeah, no, totally. And I don't think you can set a book set in England without tackling class, right?
That's fair, very valid. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I am Canadian, born in Ottawa, now live in Halifax, right? And I'm living for a couple of years in England, like I said before. And so I didn't grow up in England, and I have an outsider's perspective of this, but in ways I do think that lets you see some things that maybe if you grew up in it that you take for granted, right?
Sure.
You know,
Fish can't see the water they swim in, as a friend of me said.
ah, yeah, yeah. So with my book, Paul, he's from Liverpool, and I love Liverpool, great city. It actually reminds me a lot of my own hometown of Halifax. Because both port cities, right?
Yep.
Both maybe kind of looked down on by their respective, like the rest of the country, as
Yep.
kind of like the end of the earth
As
almost. Yeah,
someone who
sorry,
lives in a
sorry.
port, no, as someone who lives in a port city slash port province,
Yes,
understood. Yep.
yes, yeah. And but like a friendliness, a big culture of live music. I don't know, which I just find interesting as like some common denominators, right?
It is friendly is by far the kindest word for stupid, isn't it?
Oh, ouch, yeah. But like, I mean, like
I mean,
when,
that's how people tend to use it when they describe us that way, I
yeah,
feel.
yeah. But like in the UK, a lot of people will slag off Londoners and London as a city as an unfriendly city, right?
Yeah, very valid.
And it's because like there's so much going on. People are so busy with their own lives. It's, uh, I mean, honestly, a lot of times in London, people were very kind to me if I were, say, lost or in trouble. Though, I think it's a mix of people being either proud of their city and wanting to show it off, right? Or also a lot of times London being such a city of immigrants helping out other people who aren't necessarily from around there, right? So it's not always so black and white as like Londoners are unfeeling. It's like, which Londoners are you talking about?
Yeah.
Right? But so my main character, he's from Liverpool and has come to London to make a name for himself. He is a cloth mage, which means that he makes magic clothes. So yeah. It's
Okay.
in this world that's a type of magic as well as magic books. And so he has this uphill battle where he's uh, middle class, a son of a shop owner. Whereas his profession, cloth magic, usually seen as more of an upper class dalliance, not a serious form of magic, right? But
Okay.
something that rich lads might do if they just want to be like a hobby magician kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's got a geographical kind of thing against him, a class thing against him, and even his profession not being taken seriously. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right. That's interesting.
yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay.
Good. I hope so, right? There's
Yeah,
all,
no.
it's got to sustain a whole book.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of themes that, oh, you can do lots with that. That's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, well,
looking
I've
forward to
I've
digging into
always
that.
been the story of the emperor's new clothes, right?
I do. Yeah, they were
Yeah, and
wonderful.
oh yeah, great parable.
Yeah.
And like, usually like the two focal characters, the emperor and then the little girl or a little boy, little child who is the one to
Yeah.
break form and say, "Hey, he's just naked," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've always been intrigued by the con men who blow into town, manage to sell this ridiculous idea and escape into the night, right?
Oh yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant
Yeah.
confidence men. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little bit element of that in
Yeah.
the character as well, right? Like
Yeah.
he really can do magic, but at the same time, like having to sell himself, right?
Yeah. There's an interesting thing with the Emperor's New Clothes because like if I was given clothes and told I can't remember exactly what the parable is, but like if I was told that stupid people couldn't see the clothes, like only smart people could see the clothes, I'd be like, cool, I'm gonna be naked to most people. Like, like I'm like
Yeah, that doesn't factor in, does it?
even
Yeah.
if I lied and said, "Oh, I could see the clothes," you know what I mean? I'd be like,
Yeah.
most people are pretty stupid. I'm gonna not wear these.
Yeah, kind of a flaw. You're putting a lot of confidence in other people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not just your own ego where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm smart. Of course I see the clothes. It's
Yeah.
also this thing of like trusting that the common person is
Yeah.
smart enough. I'm like,
Yeah.
I do this game with a friend of mine all the time when he like is surprised by the way society goes. He's a fellow author actually. But I say like think of how stupid the average person you meet on the run of a day is. Realize half the people are dumber than that. And because the average, and he just
Yeah.
gets this faraway look in his
Yeah.
eyes where he looks
Yeah.
terrified.
Well, there's kind of a humbling counterpart, and this is actually graffiti that I remember seeing in Liverpool, right?
Okay.
Where it says, "The average person thinks they're smarter than the average person."
Yes,
Yeah,
that is
so I'm always
very
like,
true.
okay, check yourself, right?
Yeah.
Make
Uh,
sure, yeah.
that reminds me of something I post up every now and again, just for fun, which is nobody knows what side of the Dunning Kruger scale they're on.
Oh, yeah, scary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shannon Fay, what was the first book you remember making you cry, if any?
Wow. I read a lot as a child, but I'm trying to remember which one like first got that kind of emotional reaction from me. Hmm. I remember reading like And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie and being quite unnerved
Mm-hmm.
That a book could like kind of lie to you like that, right?
Yep.
In the sense of like, what you mean just because someone's a main character doesn't mean they're a good person?
Yes. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, quite a shattering revelation when you're like 10, right?
Yeah. That's your first unreliable narrator or protagonist
Yeah.
that's necessarily a hero.
Yeah, for most of it you are on board and think it's all a misunderstanding and then like, oh no, none of them are good people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so but a cry, I remember reading as a kid a lot of works by the author Avi or AVI, like one word, right? And them
Okay.
writing quite powerful children's literature. So probably something like by them, but yeah.
Okay. I like it. I like it. Good answer. Yeah. Shannon Fay, have you ever considered writing under a pseudonym? And if so, why or why not?
I think that ship has sailed.
Oh, has
I
it?
well, just because uh, in my 20s, I had a lot of like romance stories published,
Oh,
right?
okay, cool.
Yeah, and it didn't occur to me to use a pseudonym. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I should for different genres, right? But
Yep.
I'm like, whatever, it's out there now. It can only, hopefully, only help me having all my stuff under one name. But we shall see. We shall
Oh,
see. I don't know. Yeah.
it hasn't hurt. Innate Magic, my lord. It's got
Yeah.
lots of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Shannon Fay, do you think having a big ego about things helps writers or do you think it hurts them?
I mean, you are creating something wholly new with the idea that it's worthwhile for other people to read it. I think writing is, I think it needs to be indulgent for it to be unique.
Yep.
And so I think, yeah, I do think a big ego is needed for that. It doesn't necessarily correlate to talent,
No.
but but I do think it is kind of necessary for creation. Whether it's any
Interesting.
good or not is totally, unrelated, right? Whether it's warranted or not, also unrelated. But you kind of have to fake it till you make it. So I do kind of think
That's
an ego is needed.
that's interesting. I like that answer. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. If you didn't write, what would you do for your art? What would you do to express yourself? Like if it wasn't writing, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I I don't like I'd like to take up painting. I've been thinking about that, but writing just fills such a specific, niche in my life, right? There are hobbies I have that I do almost because I know I'm not good at them. I like to go ice skating. It's fun, even though I can't skate backwards or skate on one leg. But it's kind of, I think everyone should have a hobby that they're not good at, because you should do it for the joy of the thing. But writing is something that I like to think I am good at, and is so all my other hobbies that I could consider taking up, I can't see them kind of filling that same space, right?
That's so interesting. People have a hobby that they're not good at. Do
Yeah,
I?
keeps you human in every sense of the word, you know?
I have a hobby like that. I call it
Yeah.
social interaction.
Nice, but you just got to keep at it, right? Just
Yeah.
gotta, yeah.
Yeah. No, no, no. Fun. Shannon Fay, what is the best way, in your opinion, to market your books?
Oh gosh, if I knew that, yeah. Yeah. I've
This is
been
why this
lucky.
question doesn't get answered.
My publisher has been pretty supportive.
Yeah,
So,
47
yeah,
North is a division of Amazon. It's a big publisher.
exactly. So, I'm a gear in a machine, but sometimes that helps, right? Yeah.
I saw your book the other day. I was looking up like different lists on Goodreads, which is owned by Amazon, so this makes sense. But I
Yep.
was there, like I was looking up, I was looking for recommendations in the genre, and yours was like number two, and on this
Huh.
list, and I was like, oh, I'm talking to this person tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hot,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously that helps.
Oh, big time.
Um Yeah. And there was something nice in that recently someone reached out to me to say that they had enjoyed a short story of mine that had been published, right?
Awesome.
And I said, "Thank you. Now buy my book," right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's
Oh
on
man,
Amazon. Yeah.
yes, and they kindly did and had kind things to say about them. So yeah, shout out to Dr. Roy. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. 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 Shannon Fay, do you think it's possible to be a writer if you don't feel emotions strongly?
Huh. I mean, gosh, I can't speak for other writers,
Yes,
right?
you
You
can.
know.
In
I
some
would,
ways, that's the point of this interview. I'm joking.
yeah, all right. I would think yes, because I think there are lots of people who are good at, like breaking down other people's motives and machinations without being that kind of passionate themselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that can lend itself well to writing. So I don't necessarily think that you yourself have to be dramatic in any sense, right?
Mm.
To write
Okay.
drama.
That's true. I like it. And I also always think of authors like Arthur C. Clarke and stuff like that. People
Yeah,
who specialize in more, I don't want to say dry because that sounds bad, but like
yeah.
things where the emotions divorce from.
Yeah.
Pick your
Yeah,
style.
no. I do think like yeah, people who are all about breaking down the big ideas. I'm a big fan of the Chinese author Xian Lu, right?
Okay.
He wrote The Three Body Problem and its sequels. And those books, like I've met people who kind of hate those books because like they can't get into the characters or necessarily the plot, but the ideas that are presented so mind boggling. I love it. Yeah.
That's true. I read a lot of nonfiction, like and stuff like that, and it's almost better in those cases when the emotion of the author's taken out of it because it's
Yeah.
like let's be objective here. Let's look in,
Yeah.
yeah, anthropology texts and stuff like that. I like.
Ah, interesting. Nice.
Yeah, I travel through books, kind of thing.
Yeah, nice.
Shannon Fay, what are important magazines for writers to subscribe to? I update it to the modern era by saying also like what podcasts do you listen to, stuff like that on writing. If you're going to
Yeah.
shout out other things that are good for writers to listen to, this is the spot to do it.
All right. Yeah. Like I think one you should be reading kind of the fiction if you're a short story writer, you should be reading the magazines you wish to be published in. And I know that sounds kind of straightforward, but it goes a long way towards figuring out their tastes, whether their tastes line up with yours, whether they've recently published a story that were considering writing a story on the same themes or same topics will save you some heartache. And also, hopefully, you are genuinely enjoying reading those magazines, right? And getting some value out from them. Otherwise, kind of, why would you want to be published by them?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. I like it. Shannon Fay, what is the most difficult part of your artistic process?
Ooh. Well, I'm in a space now where I'm like, yay, I get to start something new, right? And then when you start it, you're like, how do I start something new, right? Totally. I type a sentence, I'm like, this is no good. This is not the first foot I want to right now. That is the most difficult. But maybe I'm just biased. Maybe every step of the way is the most difficult, and it just depends on which step you're on.
Maybe. Okay. That kind of
Yeah.
segues into one of the very next questions, which is Shannon Fay, have you ever experienced a sophomore slump, which is the experience we name to authors when they get a book published and then their second book is actually incredibly difficult. So it is a phenomenon. Talk about your
Yeah.
sophomore slump experience.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, I have a bit to say on this because when I sold Innate Magic, I was very fortunate in that it sold as part of a two-book deal,
Oh,
right?
nice.
So all
A
yeah, it
duology.
was like a dream came true. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like not only will my book see the light of day, like getting a blank check, right? To write another book, in the sense of like not having to worry, will this book sell? Having to go on that submission carousel with it, just knowing like, hey, it's locked in. Don't have to worry about that part.
Yep.
But what I did have to worry about was writing it,
Of course. Yep.
And I had, like 5 years to write Innate Magic, probably more considering how, like stuff leading up to its initial first draft, right? And then I had a year to write its sequel, External Forces. And so that would have been, let's see, I started External Forces November of last year. I'm a big fan of NaNoWriMo, so got a big chunk of it done then. And then kind of dragging my feet and then having to do a mad dash towards the finish line of finishing it.
Okay.
And on one hand, it involved scenes and characters I'd been thinking of for years, so I could at least draw from that. But also just not having that time to kind of hammer things out or get as much feedback as the first book got. It really made me appreciate other people's second books, right? We often make a big fuss over debuts, and then that second book, so many times have I seen people's second book not get the same praise, right? And now I'm a lot more sympathetic based on that, based on knowing the pressure and the time crunch that people are often under, right? Once the kind of publishing machine just gets going. So, but I am happy with External Forces, how it turned out.
Nice.
And it should be, fingers crossed, should be out later in 2022. So,
wow. Okay,
yeah.
that's gonna be fun. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. That kind of leads into the fact that it was sold as a duology. It segues nicely into the next question on the list, which is, do you want each book to stand on its own, or are you trying to build a body of work with connections between each book?
Yeah.
Obviously, for the duology, you are, but throughout all your work, I guess.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the first book is satisfying on its own, right?
Of course.
Yeah. I do think you'll be quite lost reading the second book if you haven't read. Yeah, if you haven't read Innate Magic, reading External Forces may be a bit confusing. But like there are always going to be people out there who maybe just accidentally pick up the second book, right, on a whim.
Yep. Yeah.
And hopefully it will still congeal into something interesting for them, right?
That is the hope. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I could see myself writing more in this universe someday. But originally, when I'd been thinking of how this story would unfold, I had been thinking of 3 books, right? A lot of people think in the way of trilogies.
Yeah.
And then when I sold it as like a 2-book deal,
yep.
I was like, okay, let's just combine books 2 and 3 into one narrative, right?
There's something pretty about a duology, honestly.
Yeah. And I do think the second book is stronger for it, right? Now I'm like, how was that ever going to be 2 different books, right?
Yeah.
Would have been
Crier's
so
War.
anemic.
Crier's War is good. And the thing about a 2-book deal I'm noticing is, think of Lord of the Rings, which is the weaker of the trilogy. It's the Two Towers. Universally.
Just
people
cut
who
it
like
out.
There are people who like Return of the King more. There are people who like The Fellowship more, depending on if you like beginnings or endings. But nobody ever likes the middle chapter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
So.
that out and just having a strong beginning and a strong ending, and the middle is somewhere in between both.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Good answers to all. This sounds like a wonderful book. I've already checked it out. I bought it live from Amazon. It's available on print and ebook and on Audible. Please check it out. Anyone who is listening. Thank you, Shannon, for coming on the Write Project podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.